Show presents Scratch a Track,
the podcast where we debate which track to scratch off some of the most known and unknown albums of all time.
We live in an era of singles.
This is an album.
People no longer listen to an album for the work it truly is.
It kind of defines a band.
It's just not something that people relate to nowadays.
We've all gotten the dreaded.
It started out as a game.
Which track on the album would you scratch out if you had to? Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Scratch a Track presented by the Dude and Grimm Show. We have another amazing album to discuss today, but just in case you're not familiar with our format and how we go about talking about the albums, check out our first episode of our podcast. It kind of lays out the groundwork and everything you kind of need to know going into it. But Scratch a Track, we're ready to get rocking on this one. It's an album that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and I know you have as well, and that is Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. So Grimm, this is a big one. I'm not exactly sure where to start. I know it's one that's near and dear to both of us.
Yeah, I guess I look at this as we started off the series with Abbey Road, but I can't think of a more complete work as it was intended to be an album than Dark Side of the Moon. To me, totally. I think of it as kind of like the guidebook of how one would go about doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And now, do you think you initially just say that just because it's and we'll get more into this, but it's an album that flows. It goes track to track to track, and I know when people talked about it was the ultimate concept album, but it is pretty much.
Yeah, I guess I think less about the concept of it. I mean, a lot of the concept of it is really just dealing with or discussing bigger issues in life. I mean, if you just look at the title tracks themselves.
Sure.
Breathe on the Run, Time, Money, Us and Them, Brain Damage. There's just a lot of it just talks about different, I think different things as one grows.
Yeah. It's definitely like it's like a musical representation of kind of life and times, and it's interesting. So I'm looking here. It was released on March 1st, 1973, and still today, a lot of the ideas and concepts and things that are sung about and talked about and everything really apply to life today and whatnot. So it's
absolutely.
It's
And
it's a
speaking
timeless
about
album.
It is, and I think nothing's more evidenced by that than the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe it's ever left the top 25 best-selling albums list in the U.S.
Yeah, I have a few statistics of their kind of selling and whatnot.
Okay.
But before we actually get into that, I kind of got a little bit of a trivia question, and you only have, I would say, I don't want you to count in your head. If you had to guess off the top of your head, how many albums did Pink Floyd put out before this?
Oh, man. I mean,
without counting.
Yeah. Oh, without counting?
Yeah, without just, yeah.
I'm going to say 6.
Okay,
just blind out of nowhere.
Very close. They're very close. It's actually 7. So this is their 8th studio album.
Oh wow!
Which when I read that, it just initially was kind of a little shocking to me, because typically a band's 8th album isn't the one they're probably best known for. It's almost like they were kind of like late bloomers. But we had the whole Syd Barrett era. Although I think he was only on one album, which was really Piper at the Gates of Dawn, wasn't he?
No, he was a little bit. I think he was also a little bit on Saucer Full of Secrets, but I believe you are correct, where after that, he kind of wasn't on the albums anymore.
Yeah.
Although I think served as a big inspiration to a lot of the music and a lot of the stuff he did. And I mean, hell, you could argue the muse of Wish You Were Here.
Yeah, right. Right.
But
yeah, definitely. Well, so check this out. To get back to some of the numbers, the Billboard 200 had it charted for over 900 weeks. Like, I mean, I don't even like. I think I calculated it. That's like 17 years. I mean, that's just, dude, that's crazy.
I don't know what could speak louder than that.
I know. Well, this is a pretty big number too, and it's something I actually do want to talk about in depth a little bit. Is I saw that it has sold over 45 million copies. Which,
wow.
So here's the thing with that. I not to take away from its greatness, but I think that number is a little deceiving because they are a band who came out in the early 70s. So that means there's people who, I mean, how many copies do you have? You have it on vinyl. You have it on CD, like you have multiple versions of it. And I think, in a format where, things evolve, like that, that's where some of those numbers, I won't say get inflated, but they kind of do because, think about it. People bought it on vinyl, they bought it on tape, they bought it on CD. And so people have multiple copies of it, but that's also a testament to its greatness as well. So,
well, that's a good point because I mean, if you didn't like it, you'd probably just make do with what you had. But I mean, it's, And the thing is, I have a vinyl copy of it now, but it's an old vinyl copy and I want to buy it again remastered. Because there's nothing like that sound of putting the needle down for the first time.
Right.
And knowing that that's the first time that record has been played.
Sure.
That's not too bad either.
Totally. Yeah. Well, so it came out in 1973. This is kind of interesting. Rolling Stone in 2003 and 2012, they ranked their 500 greatest albums. Dark Side was 43rd both times.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I would love to see 1 through 42.
Oh yeah, because that's top 5, no question.
Yeah, definitely.
That's top 3.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
And I guess I'm jaded as always, having been a really big Pink Floyd fan.
Yeah.
But again, I think that regardless of being a big fan or not of the band, it's hard to ignore what they did.
Sure, absolutely. I can't imagine it being that far down. But
yeah.
So anyway, this is kind of interesting. I found this little nugget, dude. The title "Dark Side of the Moon" was actually, you may know this, but there's a band called Medicine Head. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them or their work.
I'm not.
Okay. Well, apparently a lot of other people aren't either, because they actually had an album called Dark Side of the Moon. And so Pink Floyd was not going to be able to put it out under that. But they decided not to, because albums can have the same name, songs can have the same name. So they actually changed the title of the album for a short time to Eclipse. Then Medicine Head, let's just say they dropped the album and it didn't do so hot. So once there was no critical acclaim there, they didn't really feel like anybody would notice. So they retook the title Dark Side of the Moon, and now it is this. So
well, and not that Eclipse is a terrible title in any sense, because it's an awesome song on the album.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that I like, if you really want to dig deep into the album, is that it's called Dark Side of the Moon. And at the very end, one of those interviews that they have, you can hear the guy say, there is no dark side of the moon. As a matter of fact, it's all dark. Which, I mean, if that doesn't tie the whole thing together,
it does. It really does. Like
just like the rug. I mean,
yeah, dude. The dude abides. Yes, that rug and that line. It's because it almost like just throws away the whole thing that they've been talking about for the whole album a little bit. It kind of dismisses it, like, oh my god, there's this, we're talking about this deep, intense, introspective stuff, and then it's almost like, whatever, it's all dark, it's fine. So
yeah, I know it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, maybe you might know some of the technical aspects of it and the production. From what I saw, it was produced on a 28-track machine and also originally recorded, meant to be in quadraphonics.
Yeah, well, and not to be a nerd here, but I'm always a nerd when it comes to this. I'm pretty sure it would have been a 24 track tape machine
Okay.
because that was, but yeah, that doesn't matter. Yeah, and
Friggin' wiki.
quadraphonics never really took off,
Yeah.
which is interesting because I think it's surround sound before there was surround sound, and I
sound,
just
sure.
think it would have been really cool to be able to listen to this or a lot of albums in quadraphonics for that matter. And I mean, this is a
Yeah.
perfect
Yeah.
example to me of one that would have been well suited to be mixed as such.
Sure. And, it's interesting that quadraphonics never really took off. I feel like quadraphonics a little bit, it's almost kind of like 3D when it comes to movies. It's one of those things where like, the idea is great and it looks cool, it sounds cool. And then for some reason, it's like, well, people don't want to wear the glasses, or maybe people don't want, I don't know, 4 different speakers or whatever it is.
No, I get it. And I can see it being kind of a difficult thing because if you really read into the technical aspects of how a vinyl record works, they couldn't have done it on a vinyl record. It would have had to be some sort of like a 4-track reel-to-reel tape or whatever else they did. But I don't know how it could have been mixed like that on a standard LP that anyone with a standard LP player could have experienced.
Sure. It's interesting. I saw an interview with Billy Corgan a few years ago, and he talked about his kind of frustration with how film and movies have advanced technically with kind of the computer animation and 3D and HD and Blu-ray and all this stuff. And he says, music it kind of hasn't evolved as quickly or maybe as dynamically as he sees like the film and video world. And I thought it was kind of a good point, and that kind of gets me back to the quadraphonic multi-speaker sound. It seems like that's a step that could be taken. You just got to get enough people to buy in, and that's
well, you're right. But here's the thing: is maybe not the 3D aspect, but all like the high def and all that stuff you can experience still, even on a small player or something. But the thing is, how do you make a pair of headphones that's quadraphonic if it's not like some sort of a helmet that you wear?
That's true. That's true.
I don't know.
Yeah. That would also look kind of ridiculous. Like nobody's gonna want to do that.
I bet it would sound awesome, but you'd look weird on a plane with it.
Yeah. You definitely would. All right. So here's the deal. So getting into some of the songs now. One of the main single. The interesting thing with Dark Side is there's 2 main songs that I would consider to be singles, and that's Time and Money, and those were the singles. Apparently, Money came out first, and the B-side to Money was Any Color You Like, which is kind of a interesting one to pick as a B-side. Just like I'm not sure the thought process behind that, but
I don't either. And if you look at it, it's like half the length of Money almost. You almost could have fit another short song on there.
Yeah, you really could. And then, but check this out. This is what's cool. So Dark Side's released on March 1st, 1973. On February 4th, 1974, they released Time as another single. Almost a year after the album's released, they released another single. And so they released Time, and the B-side of that apparently was Us and Them, which is a long song. It's running 7.5 minutes. So that's,
and again, wouldn't have been my choice as a single. Not that it's not a great song, but it just like Brain Damage is more of a single.
Yeah, I could see that. But if you're gonna do Brain Damage, wouldn't you just put Eclipse on there too? I mean, and then at that point, but then at that point, to me, it's
just
kind of a joke.
Listen to the album.
Just listen to the album. Exactly. It's like we got half the album on singles. Like it doesn't make sense. But
they flow too good to ever think about split them up.
Yeah. No,
especially those two.
Yeah,
especially those two.
Yeah. They definitely do. So. I think kind of, maybe getting into the album a little bit. Well, actually, first before we get into the individual tracks, do you remember what do you have? What was the first song, or do you remember hearing the album for the first time? When was that for you?
I don't remember the first time, honestly, that I heard it. I remember being completely blown away, and that's the only thing that I cared to listen to for quite a while after that. But I can't tell you that I have a distinct memory of the first time. Now, I will say that I've had very distinct memories of other times that I've listened to it in its entirety, driving around, which at that point I might as well have been in a spaceship. But, the first time I don't quite exactly remember. But it wasn't one of those ones like where you'd listen to the album and you're like, oh, that's okay. I like some of it. Maybe I'll give it another listen. I mean, it was just like the greatest thing you'd ever heard. No questions asked. Well, that was it. Why even ever try to record music?
It's over. Just quit before you quit while you're ahead. I think my experience was a little different. I remember you listening to it, and I think a couple of our other friends in high school, and I probably wasn't on the whole, let's listen to the whole album and have a trip and an experience type of thing quite yet. And so I'd listened to Money and I'd listened to Time, but it was actually the first time I think I may have listened to it in its entirety was going to the Fronthal and seeing Dark Side of the Rainbow, which is, when they synced up, as we all know, on the third Lion's Roar of The Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon. And first of all, I think we just need to take a second and say, whoever figured that out deserves some sort of a prize for all music fans and hippies. And,
they made so many stoners happy.
Oh my God. And it's unbelievable.
And it's funny because we've talked about controversy before with some of the albums, and I can't see any clear controversy with this album. That would be the only thing to really talk about because it's one of those things that's always kind of been out there, and people do talk about it and people watch it. And of course, we've watched it a bunch of times. Yeah. I think it's pretty interesting, and there are some really interesting coincidences, but I certainly don't subscribe to the conspiracy theories that are out there that say they must have made it with this in mind, because I'm sorry, it's too good to have been made in that kind of a mold. Yeah.
But could you imagine being that person who did that and the first time you saw it? Because it's the two things that really sync up are the alarm clocks with the witch and riding down the the gravel road with her bike, I think. And then the second one that is also the cash registers on Money when it changes,
when it goes to color,
black and white to color, which I mean, dude, okay, I'm not a crazy conspiracy guy, but that is, there's something, I wouldn't deny it. I think, I wouldn't say that, no, that wasn't intentional 100%, but at the same time, who knows? So, but yeah, that was my first, I think, real experience. And then after that, I was like, okay, I get it now. You have to, it needs to be it's a full experience. So, well, Grimmer, I think it's time. We might need to get into scratching some tracks here, but I think overall,
at least go.
Yeah. I think we need to go through the songs, and
I guess
one thing.
Go ahead. Go on.
I was going to say one thing I think we need to do, and this is I found this just kind of interesting, was looking at, and I'm sure this is how it is on the vinyl. Track number 1 is "Speak to Me," A, and B is "Breathe," and there are 9 quote unquote tracks on the album. Correct?
See, it's funny because, you're correct. But on the vinyl, they do list 10 because "Speak to Me" is considered it at least gets its own number. Number on side 1.
See, that's so interesting because
on the CD, it's not cut that way.
Yeah, the CD, it's not cut that way. And then I downloaded on iTunes the the remastered deluxe version, and they do split it up into 10. So let me ask you, first off, are we going to include Speak to Me and Breathe as one track?
I think
Or
of it
two?
as one track.
Okay.
I mean, I'm fine with discussing it, because discussing it in that way would not change my scratch,
Okay.
because those two are so connected to me. I don't know
Right.
how they would,
Right.
you know.
Because you just don't like either of them, so that's your scratch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
So-
and it's funny because we talk about that. One thing I do want to know that I think is interesting from a musical perspective and a production standpoint is, to me, how incredibly electric the album is.
Okay.
And when I say that, I think to me it was the first time when I had really heard a sequenced synthesizer, like they did with the VCS3 and On the Run. I had not heard anything like that before, and certainly not something that was put into some sort of a song or a segue or a fragment or whatever you would call it. I found that interesting. And the other notable thing that really struck me, aside from the wonderful use of all the awesome keyboards that were available at the time and playing guitars through a Leslie and everything,
yeah.
the other thing that struck me was David Gilmour's use of the pedal steel guitar, which are those big sweeping sounds that you hear in Breathe and then in the Breathe Reprise.
Okay.
They almost, because they kind of slide from one note to another, and there's harmonies. And when I was younger, I honest to God thought that was some sort of a synthesizer. It wasn't until I was older and saw some live videos and realized that he actually did that on a pedal steel that really blew me away, because it was getting these spacey synthesizer type effects out of an instrument that doesn't fit that mold in any way if you take it at face value, which would be a pedal steel.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, they're just, you obviously know more of the technical aspects, but just as someone who sits back and just listens to it, some of the sounds are just
They're amazing.
things you just haven't really heard before. And we've both seen that Classic Albums documentary. And one thing I want to say, it's like David Fricke or somebody says, one thing that is interesting about Pink Floyd, and that's hard to talk about a little bit though, is, and maybe you have a different opinion of this, is that their music is so simple sometimes. And
Well, yeah, I mean, there are some chord changes that are pretty much just basic 1/4 and throw in a couple things here and there. It's not incredibly complex, and I think the band even alludes to that in that documentary.
yeah,
But it wasn't that they like dressed it up in this way. There was just something really unique about it. It's hard to like pinpoint it easily.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. I think some bands, and not just bands today, bands over time think about, I got to play the best, most insane, craziest, sickest part. And when you have a whole song of just that, it's like a little too much. And with Pink Floyd, that just kind of wasn't, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the musicianship, but there's some great playing on there, but it wasn't about like every part had to be the greatest. It's they also talk about in the documentary about leaving space sometimes, and
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think Gilmour's solos were always a testament to that, because as a guitar player, sure, you just want to shred it or you want to do this, but his weren't about that. But the thing is, every note was like the correct note at that moment. And which at that point, it doesn't matter how fast you can go anymore.
Right. And I think, it's interesting, with a song like Time, it starts off with the, all the alarm clocks going off and everything. And I think they talk about how they're all like kind of in a room, and they had, they're like multi-tracking stuff and individually doing stuff, and almost like the recording and the mixing of that was a performance and a production all in itself to get everything in line and synced up.
Oh, without question, and money too. I mean,
Yeah, and
even-
money too, sure.
And the fact that they made that tape loop, I remember somebody saying to me once, "Oh yeah, Pink Floyd, they like made a cash register noise and sequence."
Dude.
And I'm like, do you know how? Number one, really clever, by the way,
Yeah.
and number two, how hard, how difficult that would have been at that time to do that in the way they did. I
Dude.
mean, it's.
That was some dude in college, man, at a party. I swear I was there.
Yeah.
And he said that, and we were, I mean, I remember you being almost like personally offended by that. I think.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it'd be like
yeah.
someone saying they don't like the Beatles.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
how?
Like, yeah, like, all right, you can leave now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and those are two really cool, production things with both time and money. But I look at a song like "The Great Gig in the Sky," and it's again I don't want to say so simple, but it's soft piano, and then Claire Torrey
And the
comes
organ.
in. Yeah, and
Yep.
Claire Torrey comes in, and there's no. It's basically an instrumental song. There's no real lyrics, but it reminds me of kind of like when you hear someone talk about opera. And
Yeah.
they're like, someone, they're like, gosh, they were singing in Italian. I don't know what they were saying, but it sounded pretty good, and it's kind of like you don't know what she's saying, but man, you're feeling it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and similar too. I mean, you referenced The Great Gig in the Sky, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but even similar, she does some of that in Us and Them too.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's the same kind of feel. And that's an interesting one because I had mentioned how the album is so electric, with the exception of everything except, I believe, Dick Perry's saxophone.
Sure.
And I don't know. I just that to me was an interesting thing to have this real electric sound and have a nice clean saxophone over the top of it. It had like because that song Us and Them has kind of those more like jazz oriented changes in it anyways, and then to throw
Totally.
the sax in there, that's nice touch.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting because Us and Them was the kind of the main piano part, and I think it changed when they recorded for Dark Side of the Moon, but they originally recorded that in the Zabriskie Point soundtrack. They recorded it for that and Antonioni wanted them to record. Antonioni wanted to record some music, and they could apparently they could never get them exactly what he wanted and what he envisioned. And so they had that kind of, I wouldn't say it was like a
that
leftover,
groove.
but yeah, they had it, and so they kind of took it and put it in there for this album, and it's the perfect. To me, it's like the perfect, mid-trip song, especially after coming right after like Money, where you're rocking. It's like, man, okay, that was intense. All right, let's take it down a little bit and just kind of get into a slow, long groove.
And then of course in really great lyrics.
Yeah.
On top of that, subtle lyrics. I mean, they're saying really slow and deliberate with short phrases with the delay.
Yep.
But clear and poignant statements.
Yep, definitely. And then, again, this whole album flows, and so then it just kind of goes into Any Color You Like, which is more, it's just like I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like a synthesizer, it's complete synth, like flowing down a river kind of thing. It's just, I don't fully know how to describe it, but we talked about, I think previously we've talked about kind of what I kind of maybe called like bridge tracks, and a song like On the Run, it takes you from Speak to Me, Breathe kind of into time. And I say more bridge tracks because they are more instrumental. You could say Great Gig in the Sky is instrumental, but it's got vocals, and then Any Color You Like,
and it
kind of is more of a bridge track because that's an instrumental taking you to the finish line with Brain Damage Eclipse. Mm-hmm. So I mean, to me, those are kind of the absolute bridge tracks, which again is kind of funny that they put it as a B-side to Money on the single. So
agreed.
and And then we kind of have Brain Damage Eclipse, where I mean, I guess you think of those songs as separate.
Yeah, definitely. But I don't know. It's hard to imagine a more complete ending than Eclipse.
Yeah.
I mean, like the way the music flows and the lyrics, it's just it's perfection.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of the ultimate summary, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it really, really does sum everything up, and yeah, it completes the album. Just like you said, the last line of the album, there is no dark side. As a matter of fact, it's all dark.
It's all dark.
So it's all dark. So now we've kind of gone through each of the tracks and whatnot. I mean, it's time to get into our scratches here, and
get into the game.
Into the game. I mean, this is a tough one because there's a lot of good ones. There's singles, it's one of those ones. Do you scratch out Money because you've heard it on the radio 1,000 times? I mean, I've probably heard Time on the radio 1,000 times too, or Speak to Me, Breathe. So some of these ones, I don't want to hold that against it. I enjoy the song. I think for me, I mean, I love The Great Gig in the Sky so much, and I love Us and Them so much. So it's really, it's kind of a departure, when you throw Money in the middle, but that's also the point. And where the flip side of the album, the vinyl would have picked up. So I think it makes sense, and it's a good middle track of the song. I think it's a good song. I think it's overplayed, but for me, it really comes down to two songs, and that would be Any Color You Like and On the Run. And I know I just said earlier that those are kind of bridge songs.
That doesn't songs nonetheless if we're playing the game.
Yeah,
and I think those are, to me, the only logical choices to choose from.
Yeah.
But as I think about it, even though I love the jam of it, and I think we had kind of agreed on this when we played the game originally, but I wouldn't want anyone to be scratched.
Right.
But to me, On the Run is just so out there and so unlike anything else that I've ever heard that I wouldn't take that one to be the scratch. I guess I'd have to go with Any Color You Like.
Sure. And I would, I'd have to probably, I think I would have to agree with you there. And the reason I would agree with you is because if you went from Speak to Me, Breathe right into Time, I don't know if I love that transition as much, where I feel like you could go from Us and Them and go right into Brain Damage Eclipse. Like, it's kind of like I think that transition makes a little more sense to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to, but you could.
No. Well, it's kind of like, we were talking about Octopus's Garden on Abbey Road, and you're like, well, I've kind of been scratching that one for a long time. Here, here there isn't one. Like, I don't feel a need. It's never like I have the album on and I'm listening to it as a whole, and I feel the need to skip a song. I will say if you
had to.
If I had to, but I'm so lost in it usually that I don't even notice the transitions a lot of the time. Yeah, I really don't. I mean, I will say if there's a song that I skip more than others, it probably would be Money. That's one that I probably do skip more than others. I will say that.
Yeah, I can see that, but I also couldn't downplay its importance overall.
Yeah. I also blame that on pop radio. So
yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah. So, well, I think that wraps up our scratch a track for Dark Side of the Moon. It was a fun little game.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to this album,
what's wrong with
Lord,
you?
I hope you crawl out from under whatever rock you've been living under and listen to one of the greatest albums.
Yeah, and definitely
ever recorded.
Yeah. I mean, listen to it, on vinyl, on cassette, anywhere you can find it. Listen to it with headphones. If you happen to have a quadraphonic machine and somehow there's a copy of that flying around, go for it. Give it a shot.
Yeah, I would definitely go that route if you can.
Yeah, definitely go that route. Well, okay, I think that wraps up Pink Floyd's Scratch a Track, Dark Side of the Moon. It was another epic exploration into an otherwise amazing classic album. And we're grateful for all you listeners out there. We can't wait to do some more. If you haven't checked out our previous one of Abbey Road, we highly recommend you giving that a listen. And we will see you again soon on another classic popular album. Oh, and one more thing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe because there's more goodness coming your way.
Scratch a Track is produced by the Dude and Grim. Additional music provided by More, that's ... MORE, and the Tims, TIMNZ. Copyright 2020, The Dude and Grim Show.